Hello, everyone. Vinod here. Long time since we talked, but today I want to talk about the impact of the current change in government in the US. And I want to talk a little bit about how it could impact the idea of students going to US and also working professionals being in the US. So we'll talk about both these segments today. So firstly, what's the biggest change? There's been a new government taking over, and typically Republicans have always had a very different approach to the entire student visa program and the number of immigrants coming to the US. So if you take the Democrats, for example, for good or worse, they've had pretty open borders. A lot of people have come across the borders. But at the same time, neither the Republicans nor Democrats have ever bothered to fix the problem of a very long wait for green cards in the US. And more importantly than the green cards is that there are just 80,000 slots when it comes to H1B visas, around 85,000 slots for about 8 lakh applicants. So currently, the chances of getting H1B visa in the US is approximately around 11 to 12%. And that has not changed for the past 20 to 30 years. And it has continued to be where it is. Even by chance you get a H1B degree, you get a chance to work in the US. What's happening right now is the entire green card process, the idea of waiting for a green card when you are in H1B program has just skyrocketed. You're just waiting for at least 12 to 14 years before you get your green card. So by the time you come to the US and by the time you get your green card, it's probably around 22 to 25 years. So it's a very long time of wait. And the big problem with the H1B visa is that you cannot really work or do anything else in the US during the duration. So what that means is that, for example, if you want to do an Amazon business, you want to do some independent consulting, you want to write a book, none of that is possible. So you have to get a green card to do any of those things. When you are on H1B, you're supposed to only work for an employer until you get your green card, which can be around 2 decades. You cannot work for anyone else. You cannot do any other job. You cannot have a secondary source of income. So I think that's always been a big problem for people on H1B working visa, and that is probably not going to change in the new administration. In fact, the conditions are probably going to get a little tighter. And the reason why I say this is because in 2016, when the Trump administration came to power, there was a proposal to make sure that everybody who are waiting for green cards, and that pretty much means all Indians who are on H1B waiting for a green card, were supposed to go back to India. So that was a proposal which almost came to fruition in 2016. Fortunately, it got shot down. But now that the Senate House majority is all in the hands of Republicans, there might be a stricter law which comes into the picture, which says that people working on a work visa, H1B visa, L1 visa may have to leave the US and go back to India. So that means that, for example, people who have houses in the US, they may just not be able to afford uh, paying their mortgage payments while working in India and then paying their US mortgages. So these things have always happened in the past, and there's a chance of it recurring again. So let's see how that proceeds. So that's one thing about the H1B program. There's also the L1 program where people actually work in a home subsidiary for a year, like work with Amazon India for a year, work with Microsoft India for a year, and then come to the US on an L1 visa. Typically, under the Democrats, the rejections for L1 visas have been much, much lower. It's probably been around 2 to 5%. And under Republicans, it did increase between 2016 to 2020. I think it went up to 15 to 20%, if I'm not mistaken. So there has been an increase in L1 rejections under Republican government. So it remains to be seen how that will work out under this new administration. There are some positives, even though we feel that it's all bleak when it comes to all the immigration and working visas under a Republican administration. It is that if you take the example of Chinese, many of them used to be like Indians in the past. They all desperately wanted to come to US, settle down in the US. But as their economy developed, as it became better, the wages in China began to increase, and many people started leaving US and going back to China. So all the people I went to all the Chinese I knew whom I worked with during graduate school, whether MS or MBA programs, most of them have gone back to China. Very few of them are left in the US. So I feel that something similar could happen in the future as the Indian economy develops. There are too many Indians trying to come to the US right now. It makes no sense because there are only 85,000 H1B slots. There's only so many people who can study in the US and can get full-time jobs. There are around 8 lakh applicants who are all desperate to get out of India and come to the US. And US cannot absorb most of them. So that means that all the Indian folks have to leave US and come back to India if they don't find a job after their STEM OPT, which is a university visa given to them to work for a couple of years after their STEM degrees. Once that gets over, which is up around 3 years, if they don't get a H1B visa, they'll have to come back to India. So key thing for students is when you're looking at paying a lot of money for tuition and going to do your graduate school, your master's degree in the US, you may want to think about what happens after you finish your degree. So can you pay back your loans? Firstly, it's very difficult to get a job. Even if you get a job, you can maybe only work for 3 years. So in that 3 years, can you pay back all your student loans and then be in a position to go back to India if you don't get your H1B because the chances are minimal. Don't bet on getting H1B because you never know if you're going to get it. It's a lottery-based system and there are too many applicants. Only a 10% chance of getting it in your um, one shot at the H1B. So if you're doing an MBA, for example, a non-STEM MBA, you only got one shot at H1B visa. But if you're doing a STEM program, you get three shots, but it really isn't much, right? Because there's a 90% chance you will not get it at each attempt. So even if you apply thrice, there's still the chances of not getting is much higher than the chances of you getting. So that's how students need to evaluate the program. I feel that it's been very bad for Indians for the past 20, 25 years. The waiting lines have been long. Everybody's waiting forever to get a green card. It's only getting worse with people trying to flock from India to the US. So I would say in the future, if you're a student, you may have to seriously consider coming back to India. And if you're okay with coming back to India, then maybe go for a graduate degree. And if you're not okay with coming back to India, then maybe you should think twice. Do you really want to spend so much money getting a master's degree? I know if you're going to do a PhD degree, that's a very different proposition because obviously you can um, get your PhD done and you're not going to spend money for education. It makes perfect sense. But anybody else should be raising a lot of questions. So with that, I'm going to close my discussion. If you have any comments, let me know. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Till next time, folks. Bye-bye.